Look, man, when you have to say something, you're going to have to say what's on your mind. You know, history will tell a tale. There's a movement about of some young guys that's kind of like the quietest revolution in jazz I've ever heard in my life. And it's amazing because they're a group of young musicians who definitely have vision.
Younger musicians that are coming up, they're bringing new blood to jazz, new blood to expression.
You know, I'm very careful not to use the term jazz too loosely, because then you open up this whole can of worms that is the argument of what jazz is and all of that. And I think that's a great argument to have. But in terms of the global vision of what music is and what's happening in the scene, it's ultimately slows down the looking at all the different kinds of music that are proliferating.
Thank you. Because we're filming this, some of this I have to cue. So this is the tune we want. This is Pinson Kinson.
I just don't like it when the name of something has the effect of excluding something. If you say it's one thing, then it can't be something else. And that doesn't work for me because, I mean, the words are always smaller than whatever it is you're trying to describe. And for me, jazz is like infinite. It's always been about some kind of mystery or historically how it's part of it, of the nature of it is that it changes or something happens that you can't.
The term jazz has been alive more than my existing life. But to me, it's music. So if it's jazz and it means that this artist is connected to it in that one, then I'm honored to be a part of it. But if you want to call it Johnny, I don't mind too. It doesn't matter because it's a very the feeling of the actual music, the magic exists in a place where it's before jazz or blues. I don't, with all the respect to the terms.
The term jazz, in a sense, perhaps it's its own worst enemy. But if we redefine what jazz is in a responsible and careful way, then it won't be its own worst enemy because how people perceive it will change.
I think the problem is once jazz became a thing, it seemed to take on a persona that became less and less of what it actually was. When you listen to like Louis Armstrong and the Hot Fives, there's so many different types of grooves and rhythms. There's no thing like, oh, it's swing, it has to be in 4/4, and the drummer has to be going chang-a-lang, chang-a-lang, and the bass has to be going doom, doom, doom. After a while, it became like that sound is what jazz is. And it became a very narrow view of what this music used to be.
Long as the clock ticks, jazz is gonna change. It changed from ragtime music to big band music. It changed to bebop. It changed to hard bop. It changed to cool jazz. It changed to rock jazz fusion.
You know, acid jazz, smooth jazz, you know, neo, pseudo, you know, all, and you know, it just cheapened it to the point where a lot of people, you know, would prefer not to even, you know, exist under that umbrella.
Because we have so many categories or so many divisions just in life. Me, you, black, white, jazz, rock, pop, everything is sort of categorized for us. So there's just this feeling that there's us and there's all these other things out there. And to me, that's quite the opposite from what it really is. Everything, you know, has the same nature. Everything has the same core essence. Tap into that, and the world becomes a different place. And more specifically with music, it's the same thing. I just don't think in terms of genre. That was something that was introduced to me later on.
And everything is jazz when you think about it. And even though everything isn't jazz, everything is jazz. I mean, it sounds kind of like I'm just rambling on some random mess, but I mean, it's really hard to discern exactly what something is. You just have to sometimes take a word and say, this is what this is.
Marcus Roberts used to say it's like the relationship of food to dessert. A person who likes food don't mind dessert. But boy, a person who just want to eat dessert, they don't want to hear about food. That food becomes offensive. So I feel that in jazz, it's interesting in America that we're one of the only people in the world who created an art form, then tried to figure out how to make it not have a definition. Most people create art form, then they kill themselves. This is what Homer meant, and this is Homer, and this is what Homer, and well, this is what Dante was talking about. This is what Beethoven's art. They're trying to get deeper into what that art is. We try, however, to get as far away from the art as possible.
I think that there was a period of time in jazz where a lot of things had been forgotten. And there was a time period with like Wynn and Branford came along, and the whole group of musicians that came along with them that kind of redressed certain elements of the music that had been, you know, I'm not necessarily saying forgotten, but not as emphasized.
What was like the beginning of I guess I like to state, is the first generation of what was later called the Young Lions. Jeff Tay Watts, myself, Branford, Don Harrison, Wallace Roney, Rochelle Farrell, Monty Croft. Although, you know, at the time it was like most of the focus was centered on two artists, Marcellus brothers.
It was a time of kind of going back and really redressing certain things, certain elements that I think were important. They were telling bass players, like, look, unplug. You know, let's really concentrate on these things.
And for the most part, there was a lot of guys that were playing a lot of good music.
You know, all these nouveau bebop suit wearing, you know, not playing a note of their own, mubbly fublies, you know. And I mean, you know, I wouldn't say that about, you know, Whitney and Branford, those guys, because they're incredible musicians. But you know, their wake was a lot of wannabe. You know, the Young Lions scene was a joke, you know, in terms of being real music.
For me, there was no big surprise about the young cats on the scene emerging. I was a young lion, but at the time, nobody coined that phrase for like my generation of players. You know, that kind of came back, and it was a springboard for a bunch of folks that were on the scene together at that moment.
this whole young lions phenomenon, that phrase that was coined, you know, when a lot of us moved to New York in the early 80s. I noticed, you know, that there were stages full, you know, bandstands full of young players. They were all the same age. You know, we were all the same. So basically, we were tripping over each other's feet because we didn't have anybody older to tell us the rights and wrongs. So there were a lot of mistakes made and, you know, a lot of growth that was stunted.
The generation right ahead of me, they want that whole neo-50s suit and tie, you know, talking like, you know, you were, you know, educated at Harvard and all of that mess, you know. And you know, I'm not down with that.
The record labels, they wanted a representation of this whole young lions mentality, you know, that Wynton Marsalis heralded. Okay, so that created like a big chasm in terms of cross-pollination, you know, collaborating, you know, people, you know. And so, you know, there was less of an outreach of the elders towards a lot of the younger players because many of them had been displaced by those very young players.
In a short span of time, Art Blakey passed, Dizzy passed, a little later on, Miles. I think a little bit before those guys was Dexter. And for me, it's just having the spirit of the music hasn't been as strong to me when these guys was alive.
You know, some people want to play in the NBA. Some people want to, you know, I wanted to be a jazz messenger, man. That was. And then when Art Blakey died before I moved to New York, and it kind of, you know, I didn't really have the desire to be like a part of anybody else's, you know, it just didn't have the same, you know, jazz messengers, man. That's, you know.
If you've never been on a bandstand with people like Art Blakey or Miles Davis or Louis Hayes or all these guys who really can swing, then you really don't have the depth of knowledge to know bebop or post-bop to move anything forward. You have a limited knowledge of what jazz is.
It's like, wow, it's like, it was still just like this wild dilemma, you know, it's like Reagan years, you know, and I guess sometimes metaphysically jazz can depict what was happening, you know, what's happening with our society.
You can't move a tradition forward without knowing it, you know, because jazz is a tradition. You might come up with something unique and new, but it's not part of moving the tradition forward.
If you look back at what we now consider a golden age in the music, in the 50s and 60s, you think of more than music. You think of integration, the civil rights movement. You think of a kind of bohemian outsiderism. The problem jazz faces right now is that if you say jazz to somebody, they don't have something obvious in the present culture they can connect it with. What is it actually saying? If you ask Lee Morgan and Sonny Rollins what their music was saying, they would say, well, you know, I'm a black person in a white society where I have something to say and I need it to be heard. That was part of the message behind that music. That was part of the urgency of it. We understand that, and we understand the relationship between Charlie Parker, John Coltrane, and Ornette Coleman with black freedom. We do not understand what the relationship is between Bill Frisell and the society.
music is a place I can go where things work right. I mean, where people are together, and it's like, I mean, I like to think of it as a reflection of what life could be somehow. You know, it's just where there's infinite possibilities and there's no one gets hurt or anything. It's like you can just do anything.
Well, jazz is a living organism, and I mean, we're organisms. We are, our cells change every 7 years or so. We have a completely new, different set of cells, all of us in our body. And if jazz is to be a living organism, you can't seek the living among the dead. I mean, it's the cycles in nature, and the music is bound to change into an organism that we might not even recognize. But you can't say that that's not jazz. Jazz is just a word. It's a four-letter word. It has actually no meaning.
It's a different world, Back then, jazz was at a certain point, and it was, jazz was jazz for sure. But now, like, with the world and the media and the interconnection of the entire planet, it's like there's so many different styles and so many different influences for so many different people. That's all coming together.
I think at best, the great sages and masters serve as examples of what is possible. What we're capable of as human beings. But in order to find the way, I believe you must leave the way. Because the way is not a thing you can attach a time to, or a feeling or a belief, because it's ever changing. It's not the same. We are never the same. So you have to be open.
If Charlie Parker got out of his grave today, he wouldn't want motherfuckers playing the same shit he was playing when he was alive. He'll look around and be like, what the fuck are you doing? You're supposed to go, what are you doing? I played that already. Why are you playing this? I've been dead for 100 years. You know what I'm saying? I'm back now and you're still playing my shit. Move on. You still sound the same. That's a smack in the face to people if you keep shit the same way. You're supposed to continue on a legacy.
Like, what are you supposed to do after Michelangelo paints? Like, really, what is the form supposed to be after that? In the music sense, what are you supposed to do after a person like John Coltrane comes along and takes music from A almost through Z?
Part of what we are now that those guys weren't is products of all that information and products of all that history that came before us. People like Thelonious Monk, they were not ignoring the history. Thelonious Monk has a ton of Fats Waller in his music, and a ton of older music, and a ton of blues in his music, and a ton of gospel influence, and he's stretching the music. He's not smashing the old.
I think there is this feeling out there that's put out there in the world of jazz, like, well, before you do your own thing, you got to deal with this. You got to deal with, and you do, of course. You have to deal with the history, and you have to know what you're talking about when it comes to jazz, capital J. But man, I can't spend my entire life trying to get to the point where Charles Mingus was and like emulating him and before I move on.
There was this criticism that, yeah, there are all these young cats playing, but nobody's doing anything new. They're just regurgitating the ideas from 30, 40, 50 years ago. Now I think we have a tremendous wealth of people who are doing some very new, personal, and interesting things. However, very few of those artists are given credit for doing such, which I find to be interesting.
I don't have to look at it through the prism of, well, Bud Powell played this way, or Bill Evans played this way, or Keith Jarrett played, you know, f them, you know. Well, they're just people, you know, f them, you know. They're just people, and I do it my way.
You know what I'm saying? You gotta accept it. That was some bad shit back then. Love it. Woo, killing. Now let's do this. You know what I mean? And move on. And accept. John Coltrane's a human being. I'm a fucking human being. He's not God. You know what I mean? I hope to one day to be better than him, better than he is. You know what I mean? And it's possible. He's a human being just like you. He started some of this, you know what I'm saying? I mean, Benjamin Franklin went out with a key on the damn kite. That was him, right? Yeah. He started electricity, okay, whatever. But since then, you know, you got all these other motherfuckers doing shit too. He started, but damn, you got this cat. You know, it's like, you know, you gotta move on. So you just gotta realize that we're all human and it's possible to move on and be great just like Train was. And if you don't think it's possible, it's not gonna fucking be possible.